touted a couple years ago by Fast Company magazine, and I discovered this chemical of connection in human beings, and we've showed that touch releases this chemical, oxytocin. And so I started hugging everybody. And so unknowingly, when I hugged this reporter, he titled this article, Introducing Dr. Love. So I have to own that, right? So when you need a hug afterwards, please come see me. I'm your guy.
So how have you brought that Dr. Love into your research?
I mean, I think the backstory is, how does some science nerd guy from Claremont become Dr. Love? And, we, in my lab, get to investigate really small questions people haven't thought much about, like, are humans good or evil? And so in doing that, we've looked into the chemistry of virtues. And I've changed my life because of this. So I'm in this very privileged situation in which I get to investigate questions I think are interesting and then sort of convince other people to give me money to do it. But, if I'm not convinced that this is important research, I'm not finding important things, I should not change my life. And so I have changed my life. I've changed my life to be much more loving and connecting.
When you study oxytocin, finding essentially a chemical basis for virtues like trust, how should that make us think differently about those virtues?
Well, so what we found is that we have a brain system that makes us moral. We have a chemistry of morality. Think about that. So this chemical makes us feel what other people feel, makes us feel empathy. And because we like to avoid pain, if I do something, John Clark, that gives you pain, I'm going to feel that pain. So I tend to avoid doing that. But at the same time, if I do something that brings you joy, I get to enjoy that joy as well. So that's half the story of morality. That is, I don't want to feel pain, and so I tend to avoid doing things that bring others pain.
What's the other half?
The other half is punishment. So I need to enforce those rules. So this all evolved because we're social creatures, and you sustain yourself in a social group both by giving, caring about others, but also by punishing people who don't behave nicely. So the anti-oxytocin is called testosterone, which half the audience has 10 times as much as the other half. So most of the punishing is done by men. So in experiments, we manipulate oxytocin or testosterone, we give it to people, and then we see that this changes their behavior towards more selfishness, more punishment, or more caring, more giving.
I think you tweeted recently that spending time as a father and spending time with your kids can actually reduce testosterone levels. Is that correct?
It is. So I'm a much nicer person because I have kids, but my testosterone level is quite low. And when you're in a committed relationship, your testosterone goes down. You don't have to fight for that girl anymore, right? You've landed her, so you're nicer now. You haven't fight the other guys. And I haven't proven this, but if you have girl children at home like I do, and you pick up frilly dresses every day, you become a girly man. But at the same time, I'm much better at connecting because of my children. Now here's the breakthrough, I think, finding from this research we've done for 10 years. So Aristotle had this claim that the reason to be virtuous is because it makes you happy. We've actually shown that individuals, right here in Claremont, individuals who release more oxytocin when they're trusted are in fact happier. And they're happier because they have better relationships of all types. Better romantic relationships, more close friends, better family relationships, and they have more sex with fewer partners. Isn't this the world you want to live in? Maybe not the last one, I'm not sure. Okay, so this is interesting. So how do you build a happy life? You connect, connect, connect.
Is this true for everyone to react this way to oxytocin, or are there some exceptions?
Great question. So we found that 95% of the world, when stimulated, the brains release oxytocin and they reciprocate. They share resources, they help other people with their own money, but 5% don't. So these 5% we discovered because they never reciprocate. So they're unconditional non-reciprocators. That's too many syllables. What do we really call them in my lab? We call them bastards. Okay, so these people don't release oxytocin as stimulus and they don't feel empathy. So they have many of the attributes of psychopaths. This is not good. So where's psychopaths come from? One is genetic. The second is developmental. So we've studied repeatedly sexually abused women, for example, and in most of those they don't release oxytocin. The system has to be properly nurtured to develop in the brain. The third is what I call petty evil. So if I stress you enough, you're going to behave badly. And it turns out that high stress inhibits oxytocin, the connection molecule.
Is that where we might see something like the famous Milgram experiments and getting ordinary people to do evil things, that sort of stress?
We can do it, but I think if we reverse engineer that problem and say, look, what I want is to live in a world with more empathy, more care, more connection, I can start doing that. So one thing I suggest is a very simple thing to do, which is 8 hugs a day. So I want to encourage the audience in our remaining 3 hours that we're here together, get 8 hugs tonight. Get 8 hugs, you're going to feel better, you release oxytocin, and you're going to make the people you hug happier. Isn't that the world you want to live in? Yeah. It's easy. It's so easy. Yeah, if you don't like being touched, that's fine. I have a big machine in my lab. I can shoot the stuff into your brain. It's fine too.
What are the applications then for mental health and how people can actually get over those sorts of oxytocin deficiencies?
Right, so we are involved in a number of clinical trials for psychiatric disorders, having found that this chemical can facilitate social behaviors. For example, those with social phobia, schizophrenia, autism. So you can train the brain to release more oxytocin. And I'm always my first experimental subject. So I'm an introvert, surprisingly. And what I've done is train my brain to release more oxytocin by connecting better to people, by being better at hugging, better attending to things, to people in particular. And so I think there's a way to train the brain. Touch is important. Having a dog will work. Taking a deep breath, having a meal, having a glass of wine, all these things will release oxytocin, including exciting things. So a little stress is good. So as you know, I have a fear of heights. I think appropriately, I think heights are a bad thing, and so I'm against heights. But I recently wanted to see if oxytocin really made you trust a stranger, not just with $10 in the lab, but in a real viable way. So I strapped myself to a 6'3" Danish guy, stepped out of an airplane at 12,000 feet, and took my blood before and after, and guess what? Huge oxytocin spike, right? So I trusted my life to this guy. Why? Because I had a sense that he was safe. He knew what he was doing. He's a pro. So we do this all the time. We get on airplanes, we go to restaurants. So again, I think you can engineer your life so that you have this sense of connection. And oxytocin is calming. It makes us calmer and happier, and actually improves the immune system.
Different cultures have different rules and mores about how you touch people and when you touch people. How do those cultural differences with touch affect empathy and oxytocin? For example, in France, people kiss each other as a greeting very commonly. In America or certain other countries, they're more standoffish.
Right, so 2 months ago I was in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, and I studied subsistence farmers who live the same way they've lived for 10,000 years. So they have a little plot of land, they work an hour a day, and I was in this village for 20 minutes, and I had 60 people surrounding me. There's no electricity, there's no running water, right? There's nothing there. Full of dirt, they're wearing secondhand clothes, and all they want to do is touch me. And I just let them. They accepted me in their community, they connected to me. Everybody does it. Right? So I think it's a human universal. So what's nice about knowing about the chemistry of connection is that this is so evolutionarily old. This has been in mammals since there were mammals. But in humans, the system works in overdrive. Partially because we have these little parasites called children we have to care for so long. So everywhere I go, people want to connect. Even in Japan.
Are children the answer?
Children aren't the answer, but I think we will build family wherever we see it. So one way to think about this chemical connection, oxytocin, is it makes us treat strangers like family. So it's so easy to form a family group in the dorms, in your city, your next door neighbor. We start really caring about them, and that's actually unusual. We're the only species that regularly sacrifices to help complete strangers. Only human beings do this. And we do it to a very large extent, right? We don't only give money to charity to help people we'll never see. You know, if you fell down, not only I, but lots of the people would help you, right? Oh, you broke your leg, let me call them, let me help you, let me give you resources. So we do it all the time, and we do it happily. And that's actually a beautiful thing.
So you said sacrifice. Thinking of sacrifice, we were talking backstage about how soldiers on the battlefield in Afghanistan can actually be very physical with each other. How does that social contact play into their relationships?
Right? So again, in the military, there's a lot of touching, particularly after battle. Men will give each other massages, a lot of I love you, man, because you've been through this amazing experience together. And one way to modulate that stress response is to be connected to that family. And that connection doesn't have to be physical, but it often can be. So riding a roller coaster is a great way. You guys want a great first date? Take them on a roller coaster. Get this real exciting rush, you're doing it together, that releases oxytocin. Right? So it's like 3 first dates right there. So the same thing happens in battle. You have men and women who will bond for life through this really amazing experience, but it can be done in other ways. For example, we're investigating social media. So we've shown that using social media of all types releases oxytocin. Let me tell you a quick story on this. So we ran one of these social media experiments recently for Korean TV, Korean broadcasting system, and they included their reporters and producers in the experiment. And I take their blood, they use social media for 15 minutes, take their blood again. And we've done this before, and you get a nice solid double-digit increase in oxytocin. So as I got the report from the lab on the oxytocin increase for these Koreans, there was one producer, this guy must have been about 22, your age, he had a 150% increase in oxytocin. This is like outstanding, through the roof, huge oxytocin release. And he was using social media in private, could do whatever he wanted to do. But when I wrote my report, I said, I don't know what he was doing, but my guess was he was either interacting with his mother or his girlfriend, because this was a powerful connection. They checked, he was posting to his girlfriend's Facebook page. So his brain saw that as if she was in the room with him. So social media, good. Who knew?
And I hear so many parents talk about our generation as though we're going to become somehow socially stunted as a result of all the time we spend on the computer. I guess that's just dead wrong.
No, I think there is a level of addiction. So oxytocin motivates us to connect by using the release of another chemical called dopamine that reinforces, makes it feel good to connect to other people. So dopamine is the same chemical that's hijacked by drugs of abuse like methamphetamine and cocaine. And so there is a real addiction to using social media where it's affecting other parts of your life. But yeah, a couple hours a day, not so bad. Were you friendly?
I am.
Okay.
Now, comparing those social media interactions to real-world hugs, is that a much weaker response, though, or would you say it's
Depends on context. Again, if I'm posting to my, I don't have a girlfriend, but if I'm posting to my girlfriend's Facebook page, or even the Twitter thing, it's great when you see that, wow, I got like 750 people following me. Crap, someone likes me. It makes you feel good, right? So I think it really depends on context. I think what I've learned from this is that people are actually a lot better than we give them credit for. And I think that's actually an amazing finding.
better in what sense?
But they're actually much kinder, much more generous. And I think, what I've learned from neuroscience is not to make what psychologists call the fundamental attribution error. So you're cranky to me and I say, John Clark, he's a big ass, I hate him. But what the neuroscience says is that you're a normal human being, you're having a bad day, right? Your stress is inhibiting your oxytocin release. High stress will do this. And I need to understand that that's not the normal guy that I like. It's not the normal you. It's this you that's flooded with these stress hormones. And those are going to subside in 20 minutes and you're going to go back to being a regular nice guy. And so I think it's having empathy and understanding that, things happen and that's okay. And we should be a little more understanding and forgiving. And if we do that, we maintain these social connections that are protective against health and give us long life and give us happiness. And I think it's not actually that hard. And, I'm the king of the introvert, so if I can do it, geez, everyone else can do it too.
So then what is Dr. Love's prescription?
Right. Number 1, 8 hugs a day. Number 2, do a random act of kindness, right? Because it'll make you feel good, but the person who receives it will be much happier. And you can actually create a virtuous circle. So I do something nice for you, you do something nice for somebody else. All of a sudden we're in a world which is actually much nicer and happier, right? And, I run a 30-person lab. I'm all about, hitting our marks and getting the money in and publishing papers, but human beings come first. Human beings are not a means to an end. They are valuable in themselves, and everyone is valuable. And I think if you see people as valuable and treat them as the most important thing on the planet, then that'll become true.
I imagine some people are concerned, maybe out in the audience, that if those good feelings we have really all have their basis in what you call the moral molecule, that's somehow hollow or not real, it's just chemical. How have you had your own worldview change as a result of your own discoveries?
Chemicals are beautiful. You know, chemicals are us. We are our chemicals. And so I think we should embrace our moral nature. We have to be moral creatures to be social creatures. Morality is what keeps us embedded in the social group. And so once we see that, and morality sometimes means punishing, right? So by the way, I have the most beautiful children on the entire planet. I still have to punish them sometimes because they need to learn what the right rules are. Not because I want to, because when they're out of the house, they need to know what these rules are because society will hold them to these lines. Also doesn't mean we're not responsible. So you don't get to say, hey, my hormones made me do it, I'm sorry, you know. No, I think, you know, this is part of a larger brain circuit, which I call the home circuit, human oxytocin-mediated empathy circuit. And again, 95% of us have it, and probably even 98%, because at 3% we're just having a bad day. And so we all have this. We all are able to connect. And it's that connection that makes us moral, makes us happy, and makes us wealthy in the real sense, which is having a rich social network.
That's something I hope we all have very soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah.